the cell signaling. Do we talk about the different how cell signaling relates to innate immunity?
No.
Did I talk about histamine?
Yeah, kind of.
Antihistamines, you should talk about.
Well, I talked about it in the notes, but I did relate it to cell signaling.
You just talked about mast cells releasing histamine.
In the notes, though.
Yeah.
Not relating to cell signaling. All right. So let's look at innate immunity. We talked about that it's born. You're born with it, and it's more of a general way to fight pathogens. It's not very specific. Acquired immunity is very specific against specific bacteria or strain or species of bacteria. So when we talked about innate immunity, we talked about how there's external defenses and there are internal defenses. And so external would be, we talked about the skin and acidic secretions that discourage bacteria to grow on you. And then internal is when the bacteria or the pathogen gets into your body, there's some specific defenses. And there are a couple of them that show and exhibit cell signaling. And so that's the ones that I wanted to talk about here. I'm not going to go and list all the internal defenses. You have a chart in your notes that shows that as well. But a couple of things is phagocytosis. Phagocytosis is, remember you have those phagocytic cells like macrophages, dendritic cells. They take in a foreign particle, so like this could be a macrophage or a dendritic cell, and the pathogen binds to the surface of the macrophage and induces phagocytosis. So then what does that mean? The membrane's going to indent around it, it's going to take it in and destroy the pathogen. And so that is kind of a little bit of cell signaling with the pathogen interacting with the surface of the macrophage. But the second type, it has to do with the inflammatory response. The inflammatory response releases histamine. How does this relate to cell signaling? You guys remember the inflammatory response, what it does? I think I have it. Oops, I get it. Is that how? Remember, this is the inflammatory response, this picture here. Can somebody tell me what's going on here in terms of how this relates to cell signaling? Yeah, absolutely. The capillaries dilate and become leaky. So what causes them to do that? Histamine. So when you get a foreign particle, in this case here it's a bacteria that was on this pinprick, there are cells called mast cells that react to histamine and react to the bacteria and release histamine. The mast cells release histamine, and this chemical signal, so the mast cell releases histamine and communicates with the capillaries, causing dilation and leakiness. So that's a communication, all right, between one type of cell and the other type of cell to cause that to happen. So there is some cell signaling with innate immunity. Acquired immunity, we talked yesterday, so just to write the helper T cell again. And remember, the helper T cell releases a chemical called cytokines. So that activate B cells, activate cytotoxic T cells, as well as activate themselves. So let's talk about what that means. So I think I went through this yesterday. That remember, the B cell presents the antigen on the MHC molecule. So this is your B cell. And remember, your helper T cell has specific antigen receptors on it. So this is your helper T cell. This binding, remember, is a form of communication. The second form of communication is releasing those cytokines. So when this happens, the helper T cell, it stimulates the B cell, and the B cell does what? It's activated. What happens when it's activated?
The B cells starts making memory cells and plasma cells.
That's right. So, what was that?
It differentiates the time. It provides the differentiates.
Absolutely. So it divides and differentiates into memory and plasma cells. And these plasma cells, why are they important?
They release antibodies that will fight antigen that's present at that moment.
That's right. They secrete antibodies that fight the current pathogen, the current infection. The memory cells are just for later. All right. So why is secreting antibodies important?
Antibodies will be used as macrophages to infiltrate cytotoxic because they wrap around the bacteria or pathogen.
Absolutely. So if this is your pathogen with the particular antigens on the surface, remember that the antibodies bind to that. So here's an antibody. So these antibodies bind to and are specific for specific antigens. So the antibodies surround it, and these antibodies, what they do is they make it easier for this to happen. So this enhances phagocytosis. All right, so that's the connection between there. Okay, this enhances that. And then, so we're getting rid of the pathogens at a greater rate. All right. And remember, the antibodies can bind to the surface of the macrophage and it'll engulf it up and so on. So there's some cell signaling there as well. All right, and so that was the humoral response. So the overall purpose of the humoral response, the humoral response attacks the pathogen directly. So remember that so this attacks pathogen. And that's the purpose of the humoral response. So then yesterday, I don't know if we talked about the cell-mediated or cytotoxic cells. So when the helper T cells release cytokines, it stimulates the cytotoxic T cell. So how does it stimulate? If this is your cytotoxic T cell, the cytokine, remember that the cytotoxic T cell has receptors, and the cytokine can come over and bind to the receptor. I should put cytotoxic T cell. That's going to cause a signal transduction pathway to occur inside, and eventually you're going to get a response. What's the response of the cytotoxic T cell here? It's the same response as what happened over here with the B cells. The cytotoxic T cells divide and differentiate. They divide into memory cells, so now you have memory cytotoxic T cells, and they divide and differentiate into active cytotoxic T cells. These are for later. What do these do? These guys attack infected cells. All right, so there's two things. When a pathogen gets into you, you have pathogens floating around you, but what pathogens do is infect your cells. So in order to rid your body completely of the pathogen, we have to kill off the infected cells, and we have to kill off the pathogen. So I know from with this computer it's hard to see, so you can, if you're drawing this, you can draw this below. I'm going to put it up here to draw so people can see. So when you get an active cytotoxic T cell, what that active cytotoxic T cell does is it has a antigen receptor on it, and so what it does is then go look for infected cells. How does it know which of your body cells are infected? What do infected cells do? They present the antigen. And so in this case here, so this right here is an infected cell. And infected cells on their MHC molecules, they present the antigen. And so the antigen, here's the antigen being presented. And the cytotoxic T cells bind to that. And what that triggers, that binding, so these two cells are communicating with one another. All right, that's a form of communication when they bind together like that. It triggers something to happen in the cytotoxic T cells. The cytotoxic T cells release a molecule called peripherin. And peripherin causes what to happen to the affected cells? Apoptosis. It pokes holes, all right, so it holes in the infected cells, so the peripherin causes holes, which then leads to apoptosis, which means then your infected cell dies. So this part of your immune system doesn't attack the pathogen. This part of the immune system, the purpose of the cell-mediated response, is this attacks infected cells. And that's the purpose of that. And we just, to make this more complete here with the helper T cells, helper T cells also communicate and activate themselves. When these helper T cells activate themselves, what that does is activates them to do the same thing as what they did with the B and the T cells, is that they divide and differentiate, and you make memory helper T cells, aids in later infections, and then you make more active helper T cells. So why is it important to have more active helper T cells? Because these guys can release more cytokines, which then stimulates more B and T cells. So these guys, so more cytokines released. That's the purpose of that. And if more cytokines are released, more activation occurs.
Going back to the infected cell and the presented antigen, is it possible for an infected cell not to present the antigen?
Yes, there's some, like we're gonna see that there are some viruses that, when they infect a cell, they inject their genetic material, and their genetic material actually gets inserted into our DNA. So actually we have viral DNA as part of our DNA in that cell. And it can stay in there for a while, and then every now and then it can, those genes can turn on and it can produce more viral DNA and turn your cell into making more viruses that can go make other cells infected. So in that particular case, those cells aren't alerting your body to the fact.
So would that be like an incurable disease per se?
Yes, yes, all right, and so these are diseases that you can have kind of outbreaks, like the herpes virus, all right, works this way. So it can stay dormant for a long period of time, and then you have outbreaks of that, yeah. So one other thing that I haven't put in here that relates to cell signaling. There's one thing and that has to do with the activation of the helper T cell. So I said helper T cells are important because they release cytokines, but these guys, how do the helper T cells themselves get activated? Like, you don't have always, if you don't have a pathogen in you, that helper T cells aren't releasing cytokines all the time. That would be very wasteful to do that. So how does the helper T cell know that you're infected with something?
Wouldn't it bind to the pathogen too?
Yes, it can bind. Usually it's activated not by the pathogen itself, but let me get to the right picture. I'll get to it eventually here. here, when phagocytosis is happening, your antigen presenting cell, when it takes in the pathogen, it presents the antigen of the pathogen, which then the helper T cell binds to. And so here, this right here is the activation of the helper T cell, which then, when the helper T cell is activated, will release cytokines. That's this part here, the cytokines, to activate the B cells, the T cells, and themselves. Those are those three arrows here. So it's the antigen presenting cell. So that also connects this part to the activation of the helper T cell. So over here I can, I'm going to put here, this is the antigen presenting cell. The antigen presenting cell presents, like, let's say this example is a dendritic cell. Could be a macrophage as well. A dendritic cell presents the antigen of the pathogen that is destroyed, and then your helper T cell binds to that. And this antigen presenting cell, between the binding of it to the helper T cell and the antigen presenting cell, also secretes cytokines. And now the helper T cell is activated, and then that triggers the rest of this. Does that make sense? All right. So this right here, I can connect this part right here to this right here. So phagocytosis occurs, presents the antigen, and stimulates that. Does that make sense? And that's pretty much, in a nutshell, the immune system. And so what you can do, so I wanted to do this because it relates all the different pieces, and I put more, general pictures of the kind of the big picture, like this here and this here. So when you're going through your notes and you come and talk about this picture, you can relate back to this and say, okay, this is what's going on, this is how it relates to everything else, all right, and so on. So you can kind of, because some students stayed after school a few days this week and really felt fragmented, like they understood different parts and didn't understand how it all fits together. So that's why I wanted to spend a little bit of time with that. All right. And if you haven't spent time doing the review questions and reading the book and studying this, I haven't given a ton of homework with this. So if you haven't spent a lot of time with this, you need to sit down. You need to be able to kind of relate this yourself, all right? And so by the end of the chapter, like we finished yesterday, you should have technically the review sheet done. If you don't have it done, then maybe something like this isn't as meaningful to you because I know I've been in the seat of a student before many times, and if I'm not prepared, sometimes going over stuff like this stresses me out even more because I realize all the stuff I don't know. And so just a little talk about keeping up on stuff because we're going to now start the nervous system. And so and we're going to have stuff to do with the nervous system. All right. So that's that. Okay. So let me explain here what you picked up with the nervous system. So I have the notes, the note packet. The note packet, we're going to talk about briefly, the beginning is just about the nervous system, the different parts of the nervous system, some organs with the nervous system. And then the bulk of this is about how the basic part of your nervous system, which is your neuron, the structure of it and how it works. Why we went from chapter 11 to 43 to 48 is because the immune system and the nervous system are huge examples of cell signaling. So it kind of goes together. The College Board wants you to be able to relate, nervous system, that's cell signaling, and be able to relate that and not see it as two separate things. So that's why we're doing that. And so today we're going to talk just some basics about the nervous system. But when I was going through my PowerPoint first hour, I put up on one of my slides of the PowerPoint is this chart here, and then my first hour students informed me that I forgot to put this chart in your guys' packet, so therefore this is the chart that goes with that. So we'll look at this chart today. So this goes with the notes, all right, with that. The nervous system tutorial sheet here. This is your homework. I have a couple of videos to watch and animations to watch that is going to show you about a neuron and how a neuron works, which is the bulk of the chapter. This is due on Monday, and I did upload this onto my website because I have hyperlinks to this, like so that you can go to that and like just click on it unless you want to type in the whole addresses and things like that. All right, so I did put that there. And so that's the purpose of that. And then you have your I can statements for the chapter. Remember, those are not due. It's just to give you the big picture, and then the review sheet. So that's what you got here and picked up. Okay, so we're going to start with the immune system. Switch gears here. Okay, so the immune system, we're going to relate it to homeostasis and maintaining a constant internal environment. So the responses of the nervous system minimize changes in the internal environment. Therefore, they're essential to maintaining homeostasis, which remember is keeping that constant internal environment. So examples of the nervous system, they play a role in your heart rate. The nervous system plays a role in breathing rate, blood pressure, maintaining blood pressure, and so on. And so those are examples of maintaining homeostasis. There are three basic parts or functions of the nervous system. The first is to receive sensory input. Signals from the outside get taken to integration center by the peripheral nervous system, abbreviated by PNS. Once those signals, they get to your central nervous system, so that's the second part, integration. Signals or information interpreted by your central nervous system. And then you have your motor output, where your central nervous system sends signals back out to either cause muscles to contract or glands what to do. It could be to release a hormone or something like that. And so this picture here, this picture right here shows you kind of the relationship that we just looked at. So here's your sensory input here. So the sensor is, in this case here, they're giving you an example of your eye. All right, so your eye has sensory neurons. So I'm going to put here, there are sensory neurons that have receptors on them that causes changes to happen inside of them. So when we've talked about chemical signaling, we've talked about how there's receptors in the membrane and that they are reacting to an actual chemical, an actual molecule that's binding that triggers a signal transduction pathway and so on. But in this case here, it's light, all right? And so you have sensory neurons that have receptors that respond to changes in light. And we also have some sensory neurons, like on our fingertips and so on, that have receptors for thermal reception. So you can, you have those sensory neurons react to changes in temperature or pressure and pain and so on. And so all your sensory neurons, they're called that because they're receiving information from your senses, but they have different types of receptors on them that allow you to react to those different types of sensory inputs. So then where does that sensory neuron take that information? So the sensory neuron transmits a signal from your eyeball all the way to your central nervous system. So notice your central nervous system is your brain and your spinal cord. So those sensory neurons communicate with your brain and spinal cord, and then those neurons in your central nervous system communicate with this motor output. These guys are called motor neurons. It's another type of neuron. Motor neurons take information from the central nervous system back out to the body. In this case here, in this example, is the contraction of a skeletal muscle. And so the effector is anything that's receiving the signal from a motor nerve. All right, so it could be a muscle, it could be a gland, which can release a hormone, and so on. And so your central nervous system down the center, brain and spinal cord, peripheral, like in the periphery of something is the outskirts, all right? So anything coming off of any neuron, coming out of and not part of the brain or the spinal cord is part of your peripheral nervous system, the output. And so this happens very, very quickly. So let me use an example with another example with touching something hot. So if you were to touch a hot burner, you pull back almost instantaneously. You probably couldn't even clock how fast that is because you pull back so quick. So imagine all of the things that have happened. You have sensory neurons in your fingertip that when you touch it, they receive that the receptors trigger a signal transduction pathway, which then triggers your neurons to take a signal all the way to your central nervous system, which then communicates with a motor neuron that goes back to trigger your muscle cells to contract, which then you pull away. And so all of that has happened in that millisecond that you've pulled back, all right, and so on. So this happens very, very quickly, yes.
What happens during migraines when you can't feel like parts of your fingers or your body?
That's a good question. Migraines, I'm not exact, because it affects people differently, and they don't even know even what causes it. So I don't know exactly what's going on there, all right? And it can be very specific to different people. So that's a good question. Let me know if you figure it out. All right. So this picture just shows you, and compares and contrasts the central nervous system. So you have the central nervous system, the brain, and the spinal cord. This picture I just put on here just to give you a visual to compare to. You don't need to know all these different parts, all right? I'll tell you exactly what we need to know as we go on. And then your peripheral nervous system, here's your central nervous system. Your peripheral nervous system communicates with other parts of the body. So it has the eye, the heart, the lungs, the liver, pancreas, and so on. So you have communication to the central nervous system and from the central nervous system from all these different parts of your body. And that's your peripheral nervous system, but they work hand in hand together. This picture here, I liked this because we're going to see that the peripheral nervous system has some subcategories. So I got this, I meant to write this down, it says MCATreview.org. The MCAT is the test to get into med school. So this was a review diagram for kids trying to get into med school about this stuff. So, but I liked it because of the way it broke this down. So here's your sensory input. So this is part of your peripheral nervous system and takes information to your brain and your spinal cord, which is your central nervous system. Then your central nervous system, this is the motor output here, so that's the motor. But notice here this motor output has categories. So there's the somatic and the autonomic nervous system. Those are two parts of the motor output. Somatic means that the signal, the neuron that's coming from your brain and spinal cord is going to go and communicate with the skeletal muscle. So this is going to allow your skeletal muscle to contract. I want you to put here next to this that this is for the skeletal muscle, that's voluntary. You can choose, you can control when to contract your skeletal muscles. And so the autonomic nervous system is involuntary. So involuntary muscles and organs. So what does that mean, involuntary muscles? Skeletal muscles are just one type of muscle. We actually have two other types of muscle. The first type is the muscle of your heart. We call that cardiac muscle. And we can't control that. We can't decide our heart's going to beat faster or slower we can't do that. Oh, time flies when you're having fun. Have a great weekend, you guys.